Good morning again, Senate Agriculture back in business. We have Secretary of Agency of Natural Resources, Julie Moore here. She's going to tell us a little bit about the competing bill. I don't know about the competing bill or just some more language about the way the waters are and the way and who regulates and who doesn't and all of that. We just had some early discussion with Michael O'Grady about our miscellaneous ag bill that we might be a little incomplete. Trying to pass something when we might be able to put some more language in there and make it both take care of agriculture and A&R. So, Secretary, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. For the record, Julie Moore. I'm the Secretary of A&R, and I'm joined this morning by Eric Guzman, who is one of our legal counsel. So I did bring a fact sheet. I am unsure if you all have received copies of this previously, but I'm happy to pass it around. That just gives a little bit of context for what is a CAPO program. You're welcome. Because there's a lot of acronyms in our space, and hopefully this helps explain some of what I may say and not fully spell out as we're talking. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have just a handful of slides that hopefully will help sort of provide a point of reference for the conversation. Perfect. So thought I could just start with a little high level review of what's in the petition that was filed by the Conservation Law Foundation and some of its partners back in 2022. And then the EPA directives we have since received back. And we've had two formal communications from EPA as we've worked to build a corrective action plan. As walking through that, I'm going to highlight some areas of intersection with your committee bill, and talk a little bit about my hope that we might be able to provide some modest modifications working with the Ag Agency to really true that up with what EPA's expectations are. Talk about some of the other elements of the A&R response. Very much to your point, Sharon, the nexus with S100 and how these bills sort of fit together. And then our planned next steps. So just as a reminder, CLF filed this petition with EPA back in March of 2022. And then EPA took the larger part of 2 years to review the concerns that were raised by the petition. And this included, they examined some of our permit files, they examined files at the Ag Agency, they also conducted a number of EPA-led inspections. And then as a result of that effort, in the summer of 2024, EPA reached out to the petitioners, so CLF, the Lake Champlain Committee, and BNRC, A&R as the regulated entity, and asked us to initiate settlement discussions. Based on those conversations, then the EPA sent a letter that asserts that we're not complying with the Clean Water Act, and that we need to prepare a corrective action plan. And so the settlement discussions I would describe as largely trying to make sure there was a shared framing of the issues. So as we're building a corrective action plan, we haven't headed off in a very different direction from what EPA feels is necessary or what the petitioners are looking for. At the end of the day, we need to satisfy EPA and not the petitioners. I think that's important to keep in mind. They have, and you may hear from them, somewhat different interpretations of what our obligations are as a delegated authority under the Federal Clean Water Act, but we are obviously following EPA's lead in what they're telling us is necessary. So this is a high-level summary of the first letter we received from EPA in September. Those first two bullets that I've highlighted are really places where I think there may be a little bit of further modification to the language in your committee bill that would ensure we have that alignment that EPA is looking for. Specifically that they are uncomfortable with this suggestion of shared delegation of authority around discharges. That's not the non-point source pollution program that the Ag Agency would continue to administer, but this determination around what is a point source. And just they noted that this shared responsibility model is one we've been working to implement since at least 2008, and that it hasn't achieved or fulfilled their expectations. And then they laid out specific elements that we were required to address in this corrective action plan that we submitted back in in December. So we worked with partners at the Ag Agency and developed this draft corrective action plan to really gain that alignment between our statutes and the Federal Clean Water Act. And the CAP sets out, it is sort of organized around a whole bunch of different kind of pillars, I guess I would say. The first is roles and responsibilities, and making clear that ANR is the lead in making any determinations about what is a point source. And that flows right into permitting and regulation, where we are the ones that can make the decision about whether or not an agricultural operation needs a CAFO permit. The Ag Agency has done an incredible job over the last several years of building a very comprehensive database of all farm operations in the state. And so one of the pieces here is for us to be able to tie into that existing data management system. No need to reinvent the wheel. And also by tying in, we will have ultimately one comprehensive repository of information about Vermont farms, as opposed to these dueling databases. We propose to change our approach to farm inspections, where traditionally the Ag Agency has sent out 2 inspectors to conduct inspections. Now we're going to send out 1 ANR staff and 1 Ag Agency staff, with the ANR staff in the lead in the barnyard area, making determinations about whether or not a CAFO permit is required.
Question right there. Only where you seek people having to be correct. It's not going to be every farm. It's just where.
No, we would be the lead inspector on every farm in order to make that determination. But
to make the determination.
right, but the CAFO permit would only be required where there is evidence of a discharge. Right, so there may be farms we inspect where we say, no, this is not a CAFO.
And this is from small, medium to large.
Correct. The initial focus is certainly on medium and large farm operations, but discharging small farms will also have to be addressed.
And when CAFO comes in, what is it, a 5-year plan?
It is. Well, so it's a 5-year permit cycle. All of our Clean Water Act permits, stormwater, wastewater, and this CAFO permit would be on a 5-year cycle. Depending on the issues that may be identified, the compliance schedule could be longer or shorter, but we would have to have those measurable benchmarks as part of that permit issue.
Thank you.
So Secretary, just to clear up the CAFO part of it, because a new committee, Senator Collmore's been here, you probably heard this more times than all of us combined. The rule is there should be no discharge whatsoever, correct?
Correct.
And so the CAFO comes in and you issue a permit. Is that the CAFO more of a notice that there's been doing discharging and that there has to be better review? What does the CAFO permit actually do as far as in the real realm of things?
So in order to have authorization to discharge, you have to have permit coverage.
But they say there should be no discharge. I mean, there's nothing, none of it's really acceptable.
Correct. Under the Ag Agency's regulatory scheme, you're correct.
Okay.
And so the issue arises when there are discharges. And so when EPA spent time reviewing permit files and conducting their own inspections, they identified multiple instances of what they considered to be a discharge. And so they said, then what, right?
Okay.
You have a permit that says you can't discharge and you have a discharge. The system doesn't work. These folks should actually be covered under a CAFO permit, where then they, as long as they are fulfilling obligations created under a compliance schedule, they're sort of given an exception.
Okay, so that's very helpful. Appreciate that.
Sure. The other pieces that were contained in our initial corrective action plan proposal were regarding nutrient management plans, or NMPs. And that's something we would need to review prior to doing an inspection. that we need to update our existing CAFO medium farm general permit, as well as our CAFO rule to be consistent with the most current federal regulations. That we would commit to some sort of reporting requirements around some key performance indicators, including the number of inspections and permits issued. And that there is a staffing proposal that's included in the governor's recommended budget, which is 2 new positions at ANR, along with $850,000 in one-time money, while we build out the program, with the idea that we would come back to the legislature in late 26 with a complete assessment of staff and any other resources needed to fulfill our obligations, but based on having 2 field seasons to be out on the ground inspecting farms. It's sort of hard to say what we need for the program until we start to build the program. We did receive a letter back from EPA in mid-January, and they largely said, I guess if I was summarizing it at the 30,000 foot level, this appears to be headed in the right direction and we need more detail. And what's shown on this screen is areas of additional detail that's required. Again, I've highlighted the 2 where I think we just need to make sure the committee bill language kind of trues up with EPA's expectations. And I think we could work with the ag agency pretty quickly to make some suggested edits, assuming you're amenable to them. But it's again, just providing that additional level of detail. We need to submit our revised corrective action plan to EPA by March 18th. So a week from today.
And have you been giving any indication to whether, if you do that, I mean, we see the communications here, they're saying, okay, we need more, but if you do that, they should be happy. I mean, there might be different views from outside groups. There might be different views as far as in this committee. But as far as with the EPA, if you do all of this, they seem to be on board with it.
Yeah, I think as I say, their high level feedback was this is moving you in the right direction, the direction we believe this needs to go. We need this additional detail. If I was to posit the one area that may be challenging is this number 3 on the list on the screen, which is securing sufficient staffing. They have been clear with us. They don't believe 2 additional positions is sufficient. That said, when we sort of push back and say, but we don't know what we don't know, they've acknowledged that. There's in the $850,000 of one-time money in the governor's recommend, 250,000 of that is for IT work so that we can build an interface into the ag agency's database. The other 600,000 is meant to be a little bit more flexible, and whether that's some seasonal employees to help, contracted resources to help, but to the extent we need to multiply that existing workforce we'll have of 4, we think we have that flexibility.
Because you have interagency cooperation, you have people on the ag side doing the same, right? I mean, so they won't count those as under your purview.
Correct. And that's been a challenge throughout. The ag agency has made several offers of kind of detailing staff to ANR to support this work.
We'll deputize them.
Correct, exactly. And EPA has indicated so far that they don't see that as acceptable.
And why is that?
Because ANR is the delegated authority to administer the Clean Water Act programs in the state of Vermont, and there isn't an ability to sub-delegate those responsibilities. And so the staff have to be directly within the chain of command of the entity that EPA kind of has its control.
Okay, because it just seems that you have the agency of ag that's going to be able to say right off the bat, hey, here's where we've been. Here's the top farms we definitely need to get to.
Yeah.
And then, so that makes your job automatically easier at that point. And that's, like you said, they're kind of, they don't do anything, but they do tell us where the bad spots are so we can go and get it. So,
correct.
You know, when they say 2 people are not enough, but actually we have more than that. It's just 2 people are going to do the enforcing.
Sort of be the lead, making the decision. You're correct. So and we propose or put forward several different possible approaches. So far, this is the one they're comfortable.
Yes, thank you. So Secretary Moore, the 2 positions that you're talking about, if I'm understanding what you said, the 850,000 is one-time money, but won't those become permanent positions at some point? which
There
would
is
require-
300, no, there, I'm sorry, I
That's all
misspoke.
right.
There's $300,000 in a base increase for ANR as part of the governor's recommend too. Because you're correct, those two positions are envisioned to be permanent.
Thank you.
And then the last piece is just the proposed next steps. So as I noted, our revised corrective action plan needs to be submitted to EPA. Oh, I should say March 18th, not March 18th. The proposal that ANR and AG work together to recommend some additional clarifications to ensure consistency with that draft corrective action plan. And then just flagging the testimony on S100 is planned in Senate Natural on Thursday. I understand, I know we've been invited. I believe the Conservation Law Foundation has been invited. I don't know, Steve, if the Ag Agency has been invited.
Not yet. We were in there a week ago,
Okay.
but not this week.
And so S100, I really do see as a companion to a lot of the language you have in your committee bill. It is really focused on changes to Title 10, so the natural resources part of the statute, including giving us some of the same authorities to access farms that the Ag Agency already enjoys, as well as truing up some of our definitions with what is in the most current versions of the Code of Federal Regulations. In addition, and sort of beyond what we needed, I believe, to satisfy EPA in terms of changes to Title 10, S100 does include a fairly extensive agricultural stakeholder process with some reports back due in September of this year and January of next year with a set of questions that this committee may wish to consider as well.
I think we would like to see some language out of this bill. And review that. I don't know what the committee thinks about that as well. So certainly, I mean, that's, you know, I know the Chief Ag would probably just like maybe not to have that and maybe just to get this bill through, but I think we're gonna deal with this all the way through, and why not just have the right language in there? And I think if we can get the language in there, either this bill or 100, and we can get the goals of what both agencies want. I think that we could probably get everything everybody wants. I think.
Yeah, certainly our intention in the changes we've brought forward in S100 and the changes the Ag Agency has reflected in your committee bill is to create that.
We see great
alignment.
cooperation between the both of you. I really do. We see that. And I don't want to muddy the water for agency of ag and all that, but also, it just seems like we're kind of voting on something that we probably should try to vote on the whole package and get it passed the right way. I believe, but yes.
Is the existing MOU done as,
It will need to be redone as part of this process. That was one of the changes EPA asked for. They asked for it not to be called an MOU. I think we are awkwardly referring to it as like a document at this point, but they would like sort of I don't even know what the word is. They would pick an agreement between the agencies.
They really don't want an MOU. They want you guys to take the lead on that and then them almost be subservient to
Yeah,
what you're trying to
directive
do.
almost.
Correct.
And then they've asked for the opportunity to review that document before it's considered final.
and is this your first trip into natural with respect to this bill? Yes, 100 bill.
Yes, yeah.
So with only 2 days remaining in a perfect world, the second being crossover,
Yeah.
although I think there's a fee included here. That's actually an exemption of a fee.
Yeah.
So maybe it will have to go to finance anyway, and that would give us an extra week. I'm just trying to look ahead and figure out what the best.
No, the timing's definitely
Yeah.
challenging and just to be very direct, these changes, the Title 10 changes can't wait. Like we need to have those to demonstrate to EPA that we're continuing to march along this timeline. And I'm concerned that, you know, to the extent we do something larger that makes more sense for us as the state of Vermont, I think that that would be great, but at the end of the day, those changes to Title 10 are pretty integral to my ability to make the necessary demonstration to EPA that we're serious in our commitments to implement the corrective action.
So I think to the chair's point, including identical language that's in S100 is probably not a bad idea. Things can exist independently
Places.
and there's no issue there. So I think we ought to take at least a look at what we could grab out of S100 and put in our bill, and then we can get it out of here. I think that satisfies the jurisdictional committee requirement. I don't know that it does. Because as you correctly point out with Title 10, it's going to wind up going there anyway at some point.
I think we're in a position where we want to help and we just
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're helping. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't want to not get in there what ag needs, but at the end of the day, what ag needs is what A&R needs and vice versa. And when you have such great cooperation between the two departments, you just don't need to be the fly in the ointment. We can, we just want to help as best we can. And I also don't want to pass something out of here that we know that somewhere else is going to get superseded. So why not just try to do it all at once? Everybody good with that? Yeah, Mr. O'Grady? Is that the language you can get to us and get it in, and so we can take another peek at it tomorrow, or
Sure.
Later.
Could I ask the secretary?
you can do whatever you need to do, sir?
You said that you wanted some changes to the committee bill?
Yeah.
Could you send me what those changes are?
Yes, by the end of the day, Sarah.
Yeah, I won't be able to draft it. I'll start drafting at lunch, but I should.
Okay.
We're coming back in tomorrow anyways, right?
I don't have it.
Oh, we don't? Okay. Or we had them in for Thursday? Thursday. Is that be okay with you?
Yeah, that's great. One other point is I think S100 doesn't have an over fee in it, but it has the reference that all APO permits get permitted under previous, say, 2822. So that means it's going to be paying a fee of 1,500 or 2,500. And Secretary Bloom is usually pretty good about catching those. So I wouldn't be surprised if S100 would go to finance individually. The committee bill, as we talked
So they're
about,
both headed there anyways.
is there already has one anyway.
Okay.
So
Steve?
Thank you, Steve Cogman, Agency of Agriculture. It makes perfect sense to me to combine them. We've worked, as Secretary Moore said, we've been in agreement with this process throughout. We want to take these steps to make sure that the EPA is comfortable with A&R's ability to exercise its required authority. We're in complete agreement. Initially, we were bifurcating them to give the Natural Resources Committee time to take this view as something that's plainly within their jurisdiction. I don't know whether Secretary Bloomer will still send it over there, so it will help with the crossover deadline or not, but to me, it makes perfect sense to combine them because one doesn't exist without the other. If the other one doesn't get passed, we'd be asking on the House side to take out the pieces that we've amended because they wouldn't fit with Title 10. So it doesn't make sense to consider them jointly, I think.
Eric?
Yeah,
Just because you're in the room.
Go ahead. I disagree with. No,
I completely agree with the secretary's sentiments, and I think that it makes sense to approach these as joint efforts.
Yeah, and I think Steve and our general counsel, Catherine Guessing, have some time even together this afternoon, maybe with Eric too, and can hopefully get the language changes knocked out.
Good. Okay. Anything else, Secretary?
That was it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're all good on this. It's all we got before us at this time. Is that correct, Linda? Okay, I guess we'll call it a day here in Senate Agriculture.